born in Rukunjiri, as they say. Born to Mr. and Mrs. Bahati. My dad is Elias Bahati. My mother is Karunji Constance. Very wonderful parents. They shaped, you know what? I would not be anywhere close to who I am as a person if it weren't for my parents. Mostly grateful for a feminist dad. My father is a kind of man who, I think every girl and their dad, my father is a kind of man who, we're growing up, so at the time we're still good financially, we were quite okay, right? So we had a garden. My parents like to they're farmers at heart. They're farmers and they like to host. So at heart, it's kind of the same thing. So we had this garden and we'd go and harvest. And typically, you know, I guess in your typical household, if you have workers or house helps, kids don't do a lot, right? My father would say, so let's go harvest. So we'd harvest and would pack the truck to full. It was one of those big trucks. And I remember one day after we had done, because, you know, we're like, okay, we are kids. I mean, no one expects us to be up there. My father says, so now what you're going to do? You're going to sit up there with the workers. I said, what? Yeah, because I must have been like 12, 13-ish. And I was a small person. So I was like, he's actually not serious, is he? He says, no. And it's on you to not fall or fall. It's your life. Make sure you make it back home. And there we went. So it was me and my brother. I have a big brother. And we sat on top of the truck and I was holding on for my life. My brother too was, but you know, I feel like boys are adventurous, so this was like exciting. And at the end of the day, we got home and it was actually not that bad. And I don't think the lesson is put your kids in and safe things. But I think the lesson for him was, you're not bigger than this. You're not bigger than the worker you get. You're not bigger than any job. So we got our hands dirty. And you know what's interesting? After that harvest, because we had invested maize and it was holiday. The next morning, he did not buy bread, did not send milk home. We stayed in town, right? So like at 11 there, we complained to our house help. We're like, hey. So she makes a call to my dad and my dad says, hey, I brought maize. Did they not harvest maize? The maid said, hey, there's maize. So tell them for breakfast, if they want to eat breakfast going forward, they're going to go, I don't know what it's called. In Runyankore, no kure. They're going to dry that maize. Then they're going to beat the corn of that maize. And then I have a firstborn who is a boy, isn't he? He's going to take that maize to a machine, make posho for porridge. And that's it. My father never bought anything. So the next day, let him find when you've not done it. The next day we started doing a thing. We put out the maize. We started hitting the maize off the comb. If you hit little, that's on you. If you hit much, that's also good, right? And then even fast forward, oh my father, fast forward, we have a depot, right? So what we do, you know what, I feel like my dad taught us all these lessons over the years. And I don't know how I ended up talking about my dad this much in detail. But even when we had a hardware, when people would come and say, I want iron sheets, if there's not anyone he's seeing on site, like there's not an employee or anything, Lyn, go there, we're folding. So we'd fold the iron sheets. Eventually then we had a depot. We used to sell, you know, some beer and crates and all these things. So if you made an order for 5 crates, 5 is very little. He would say, Anna, I'm going to drive my fuel to deliver 5 crates when it's just up there. So he would say, you and your brother, carry the crates. And mind you, a crate with beer is actually heavy. One with empties, the other with beer, so we'd do. And you'd say you have about an hour. And I'm giving you an hour because you're young to have gone and come back. And to be fair, I look back now and say, because the way my life turned out eventually is then we lose everything. Had he brought me up in oh, she's a girl, or she can't do, or they have house helps, I'd never have survived. I'd never have had the instinct to look for a job. When I got to Kampala, first thing I looked at our surroundings, I was like, okay, we don't have money. I'm not going to school. I don't want to get married young, that's for sure. So I want to go and look for a job. So a very smart man. And the other thing that I very much attribute to him is the transparency. My father raised us almost in a liberal way. My father would come home and say, you know, Of course, I don't think he gave us the exact figures of his financial situation, but he'd come and say, I have only about 4 million, so we have to survive for the next, say, 5 months on that 4 million. So he allowed us the chance to actually know what real life is. When something went off and he said, I made a bad deal, and let's say this bad deal is almost going to come with penalties or issues, he'd come and sit us down and say, no, now, so the other deal I made backfired. There might be a consequence or two, and this is what it might look like. I do not want for you guys to be shocked tomorrow should the consequence be public or even anything. And I know that many households don't do that. But for me, I run my business on purely honesty. Edgar, if I tell you 14 days and something comes up, I'm going to reach out before the 14 days and tell you. But it also allowed for me to fail and come back to my father and say, nakoze deal negana. Which happened when I starting out in business. There's so many blowbacks. But I was not scared to come and fail because he made it okay to fail. Because when you fail, you learn. When you learn, you get up. We were raised, and this is both for me and my mother, which is why I said I'm glad. Because as a girl, you'd expect me to have been, on the softer end of things. But would it have worked for my life? I don't think so. Because here I was in Kampala with only a senior 6 certificate. At the time when we came, I didn't even have the past slip yet. I didn't know my results yet. We had a household to feed. This is parents who have not known anything except being self-employed. They're trying to make it in a new town, which means all of us are supposed to be scrambling to find something to do. So had I sat down and said, oh, now my father doesn't have a job, a well-paying job, where would I be, So every so often, I look back and I'm glad my father raised us the way he did. And we were friends, and we're still friends. It's allowed me to be a decent person as well. I don't have the whole class difference. My border guy is a person like me. Like I said, all our workers were normal people like we were. We did what they did what we did. There was no difference. And I think it goes a long way when you're like that. So if today, God forbid, if today my business burned to the ground, I'd build again. And I don't think that's a thing you just wake up and do or learn to do. I think it takes some lessons. It takes some representation, which was my dad. He showed us that I can fail, I can get up. It's okay to fail, it's okay to get up. So even like the language, my father's a good salesperson. My father could sell me to me and I'd buy me. He was a good salesperson because he allowed us to experiment. We'd go with him. We used to take sell crates to Katuna. We'd go all the way in the pickup and would sit on the back of the pickup and would be the turn boys. So when they say we've brought 100 crates, well, the other person will have workers. We also just don't sit and hold our hands. So me and my brother would just be passing. And it came down to even the most trivial things. My father growing up had this rule. When it was time to do laundry, every week had a person he would do laundry with. So he would say, Lyn, this week it's me and you. So we'll do the laundry for the entire family with him. And that was his way of bonding, but also just teaching us a few things. And that's my mother. I also have a mother who is a straight woman, business person. I say I think to have had friends for parents, to have had people that I can fail and come back to. They also modeled for me business, so yeah. My company is called House of Ndinda. It came from a mind. The idea behind it was I wanted to create a house bigger than just the furniture. When I was starting out, I was ideally a DIY blogger, do-it-yourself really, but still in the line of furniture. However, I am a woman of many passions. And I think life had taught me up until then that I cannot be contained. I'm not one for boxing, say you can only do corporate stuff, or I can do about 5-6 things, and I would hate for it to be contained because of just a name. So when I was starting out this business, I said, you know what? I don't want to do something that is going to say furniture now, and then say 5 years down the road, I go into pottery and I can't put it under the same name, right? So, which is why I said house, because it's a house of things. But also the other idea was that it would be a house that also welcomes more creatives, people, like-minded people, other different creatives. So yes, that's why it's called House of Ndinda.
Does that surname of yours have a meaning?
Yes, so my surname means, it can mean two things in my language. Andinda can mean, because all names, I think most African names kind of have an attribute to the Lord, right? So Andinda means he protects or preserves, whichever you choose to work with. But it can also mean, if used in an action, way, it can mean to wait. So ideally in Runyankone, if I were to ask you to wait for me, I would say, Edgar Ndinda. You see, it's pretty much the same, but different means. It has both meanings. So again, now attributing it back to why it was also House of Ndinda is because I thought the Lord waited. I'm a very strong Christian faith. My faith is pretty strong. So I had both meanings. One, for the house to be for big things, and Ndinda, which is me. First, if it can contain me, it can contain other people. Second is that, you know what? I'd gone through a series of things to get there, and I thought he waited. There's actually a song, so funny, it was playing today in my head, He Waited. I think it's a Travis Green, He Waited.
And now there is this experience now you've galvanized over the years. What do you know today that you didn't know then that has built you into who you've become?
I didn't know that I was this capable. Given I grew up in you know how they say my father is a feminist? I don't know if you know the phrase, but my dad is one of those. So growing up, it wasn't a case of girls do this and boys do this. It was a case of all of us do this. So I did grow up in an enabling household, but you do not know until you've actually gone through the experiences, right? And for me, my story is one of those where we had to start again, where we had to build again, which is how when I get to Kampala, do this bookshop thing, I had the need, because we were rebuilding, we had lost everything and we're starting again. So there's the need to build. And like I said, I don't know that I knew how much resilience I had in me, because at that age, all you've seen or done, the craziest you've done is, I don't know, sit through a fees issue. That could be the closest in that, because I was pretty young when my dad lost everything. And at the time, I think the biggest struggle was tuition, covering my school fees, because I was in high school at the time. And that could be the closest to a hard thing I think that I'd had to deal with. So now, fast forward, I'm in Kampala. Good Lord, no one warned me about Kampala. I mean, they did tell us that it was a big city and just crazy. But I think coming from a small town and the family I had, I'd been sheltered. I didn't know that the world could be this crazy. It could be so many people. Then you also have to keep pace, because small towns are really slow paced. Then of course there's lots of learning to juggle work, finding a job to start, and then keeping the job, and then shifting from that job to another job. And then down the road, I've built a business, almost 9 years now. And the business comes with its issues. Entrepreneurs are not telling you the truth. It's really tough. You have to maintain, you kind of have to stay course. I think for me, that's the lesson. You have to stay course. If you're not managing the employees, you're dealing with the URA, for example, or it's lots. So you don't know that you're actually strong enough to do this up until you are. So that's what I now know that I didn't know then, that I'm a resilient person.
And again, following up on that, what would you say are the biggest opportunities you've gotten from the challenges life has thrown at you?
One, resilience, has given me, so for example, all the clients I have met that currently I have worked with House Ndinda, are people that I actually met in the past, people that I worked for in the past. So had I given up, maybe I would not be here. There's opportunity in the hardness, for me to network, for me to push harder. And I think then I didn't know that I was building a community that now I'm benefiting from, right? The opportunity is also, first of all, I don't think there's as many women carpenters or women doing this field. Yet we are pretty much the most detailed species between male and female, I think, especially with things about homemaking or furniture, picking the rug. I find that when you ask a gentleman, hi, we need a rug, go get us a rug, they are thinking logically, does it work? Does it look like it can work? Yet for a woman, I'll think about color. Will it fit the space? Will I manage to keep it clean with the kids? Will it get dirty easily? So I found that how is it that there's as many men doing this furniture, but there's less women doing this, yet I would say we're the most detailed people. So there's opportunity for me to get in that. The other opportunity that arose from my challenges is then I think from when we lost everything, we pretty much lived in small spaces. So I managed to learn to be in small spaces, but beautiful spaces. I learned my way around beautifying small spaces, which is actually how I started the DIY blog. Because at the time I couldn't afford furniture, and to be fair, furniture is quite a luxurious product. So at the time I couldn't afford it. And I remember saying, so how does one make the space pretty? How does one beautify the space? At the time, I used to stay in a studio. But I thought there has to be a way I can make this beautiful. And luckily for me, my challenges had been one where we had shared spaces. But I also grew up with a mother who is very strict. Cleanliness is key. She likes beautiful things. So I could see that even within our, compromising situation where we were in small shared spaces, she still made it look, beautiful enough. So now fast forward, I'm doing this DIY blog. I start to actually cut out small pieces and put in my studio. Then of course I would share every Sunday. So I realized there's traction. People actually enjoyed. People had the same issue. They were struggling to beautify their spaces because one, the price is crazy for furniture. But two, also the houses are pretty small. I think if you're in the rental section of things. So there's opportunity for me to also just grow my interior decor, which is how I started. So I started to do interior decor. That's how I started out. I've only come down to just production much later. But earlier on, it was interior decor, and that was also an opportunity that arose from having lived in those spaces. The other opportunities, I would say, or maybe the things that I've had to rely on now as an entrepreneur who has lived a difficult or challenging life, is that I'm also resourceful. You see, when you're going through a little bit of financial hardship, you learn to make things work. You learn to get an option that's not the one that is your conventional one, right? Which is something, now it's a strength. It's almost like I honed a skill out of the situation. I am the most resourceful person I know. By the time I give up on a thing, I have tried 6 times, 6 materials, and then I can give up. But even then I might go and do research and ask someone else. So I think that's, a here and there of what I've actually picked from my life experience.
There's something interesting that you talk about, beautifying small spaces.
Yes.
What can you tell us about, because averagely, the person we're speaking to is probably living in a studio house or a 2-roomed house. What tips can you give such a person from your experience?
Because it's a studio, you have small space to work with. I'd focus on like 3 or 2 main defining pieces. Your couch is going to define your space. So I know it's a studio, so you will have a bed, because there's not I think some of the current ones might have like a partial wall that you could maybe say, I can hide my bed. But typically 2 of the main important pieces are your bed and your couch. I think those define what your space is going to look like, because it's together, right? So I would say, first of all, go minimal. You need the thin looking type of furniture, which I think is more Japandi. I think the Japanese are the more minimalist people, so they look for, like, when you're picking a couch, don't go for one that's like bulky. Bulky, when I say bulky, I mean in size, right? It shouldn't be bulky in size. Go for a leaner couch. And when you're starting, or just do like a two-seater. Do a two-seater, and you also want to utilize the studio, remember. So you can do a two-seater and get some floor cushions. Because floor cushions can be the ones with handles. You can get some with handles. They can be used. You can put them on the wall, and when you have visitors, you can put them down. And then if your bed looks nice and your sofa looks nice, it takes away from the clutter, the terrible looking feel about bed and chair in the same space. I would also say go neutral color. I think neutral colors will work well for the main pieces, because then you're not also overly cluttering the space. That should give you like a good flow for the space. Yeah, so I'd heavily invest in a couch and a bed. And when I say heavily invest, I'm also not saying go and spend lots of money on it. I'm simply saying when you do the work, get someone who understands their craftsmanship to do the work, that even when they do it on an affordable budget, it still comes out really smart. Then go pick neutral colors. And then ultimately it comes down to who you are as a person. What do you want your space to be? And I think this is a general rule, but even for smaller spaces, I find that people are afraid to decorate and be themselves in that space because it's small and, I'm going to leave, it's a rental. I find that, I mean, most of us, for the biggest part of your adulthood, you are in a rented space, right? So for how long are you going to wait to make a space your own, Because a home is something you want to come back to and feel comfortable and feel at peace. That's the idea. So start decorating from an area of who am I? What do you like? And then, you can work on that, because that also gives personality to the space.
Okay, and then the challenge that has given birth to ideas, to opportunities, to a journey. And 9 years, almost a decade later, your journey has moved into many things. What has now become your signature outlook, your signature idea, that if someone looks at something, they say, no, that's House of Ndinda?
It's interesting you say that, because I have occasional or a number of messages coming in every other day or so about, are you the one who made the chairs at that place? Oh, I thought it was House of Ndinda. Or are you the person, So I think our current signature style, it's fully wood. So anything wooden could be us. You just now have to look closely to see whether it's us, right? So we make our pieces from wood, that's all made in Uganda, that's all grown in Uganda. But we also have a knack for good craftsmanship. Our finishing is seamless. It's almost, when you see the product, you almost think it was imported in. That kind of finishing, that's one of our signatures. I don't know, people keep saying they've seen pieces that look like me, and I don't know what it is, but I think it might just be that they're also not your typical pieces. There's a level of it's a little bit of an eclectic style piece. It's a piece that you buy, and it transforms your space from an angle of, that could be art.
I'd like to understand and take us to the soul of what makes that kind of furniture different, that if I look at it, I can identify it with your brand.
You know how? I find that that's a question I might not be able to fully explain. But let me give it a try. Because the reason I say I can't fully explain is that it's like, I'll give an example, a very interesting day-to-day example. You know how people say, "Nti omuntu alina omukono gw'ekintu," It's like, usually if you make share, definitely I'm a Mchiga, because why am I saying Wushare? But there's people who make Wushare and the other person makes Wushare, and you're like, the other person's Wushare is better than this one. So one, I think there's also just that. It's just that God made us a certain way. We have certain outlooks on things. Then coming down to, I think mainly for us, there's a passion. When we make a piece, we love what we do. Edgar, listen, Every so often when business is hard, I'm like, I'm closing shop, I'm going back to my village, I will figure something. And then that same night, you could wake me up at 2, show me a piece that you want made, and I'm excited. So I think there's a passion behind the making. There's also the detail that I mentioned. I'm pretty detailed, and like I also have a love for art. I have a love for pieces that are different and unique, right? So every time I'm making a piece, I think when people give me like a typical table, I'm like, could we just adjust this corner? Could we apply this look? Could we apply a different knob? So I think I'm just not conventional. So there's an unconventionalism behind our pieces, but truly it's the passion, the detail, and I think also the years of experience now. You know, what I made at first and what I make now, 2 different pieces. So yeah.
You sound like a big brand, like Coca-Cola, who is not willing to give out their formula. But let us into your craftsmanship, your creative process. What is it that you're going to add to an item that
That's different. Okay, so the basics of furniture that I think everyone should do, which I think we also make sure to do, is first of all, we use dry wood. Dry wood is a non-negotiable. The minute you use wet wood or semi-wet wood, the pieces start to fall apart, they will warp, which is terrible for wood business. The other thing is knowing our different types of woods. I know that most of at least the carpentry people just use the one wood, and they've used the one wood for as long as we can remember. It's up until I got into the furniture business that I realized every time people say si mugavu or you say there's a hardwood, they first thing they tell you is mahogany. But there's more to wood than mahogany. We have the teak woods, the most beautiful grains. Sudanese teak, Elgon teak, beautiful grains. We have nkalati, you know. We have mugavu, which is really one of the woods that I like. It's as hard as mahogany. And personally, I think it's prettier because it has a diverse grain. It flows beautifully. So that's the thing. Learn about the woods. If I'm making a bench, right, instead of using your typical hardware knobs, I wonder what else. I think of, like I said, I think of the other material that I can add to the piece. So if I'm making a bench, say for like a mother or someone who has kids, I think about the safety of those kids. Are they going to knock themselves? That's why our edges are going to be rounded instead of sharp. Then for handles, because I also know that can easily become an issue, a safety issue, we will consider material like leather. You could make leather straps and put them as door handles, you know. You could get like there's almost a ceramic feel to the handles. It's also diverse. So you see, when I approach the table, I'm just not doing a table because I'm doing a table for money, which is why I'm saying that I think it also comes down to, do you like to do what you're doing? Because when you like something, surely you're going to want to learn as much in the field, but also to experiment. There's things I've actually tried to experiment and they've failed. But you know what I've gotten out of that? I can try something else. It's almost like the curiosity to do something else, right? So for me, what would be a typical bench, I'll think about, of course, you think about functionality, but I'll think about whether I want to give a space with babies, sharp metallic knobs. I'll think about whether the design of the knob is like, is it long? Does it have any corners? Could this become an issue? Which is why I say I put like leather straps. They also look smarter. They also are not gonna, it's leather, so it's most likely not going to hurt a person or a baby. I think that's kind of the formula really, but again, also I have over the years built relationships with my people, carpenters in the field. Starting out, because I started out in the workshop. So I made friends with people who made these pieces over and over, because almost all the carpenters that I think I learned from are like twice older than I am. But those relationships, they also shape your view on things. So what you're doing is just adding the day-to-day, the things that have changed. Because of course they're used to like making your typical bed. But then you bring an angle like, you know, bokola woti wano, netuleta kano, chijavayo, you know? So that. So yeah, the relationships kind of also build, you've tried this one, you know this one's strength is maybe not chairs. Ono nja muleetera ebya upholstery. So, because I don't have the same person for upholstery and wood. So I've gone through a number of different people and I have said, okay, so your strength is woodwork. Your strength is finishing. Because finishing also has, it cannot be the same person that does all these things. It could, but it's going to delay your process. So I have also gone through people who do finishing. I'm like, I like omukono gwono omwami ku ntebe nga ngimaliriza. Noli ajja bajja naye mulala. Then I know, now that one for my woodwork, I can't give you the upholstery. That's a different craft. So I am actually just kind of merging different crafts to make one piece. So yeah, I think that's the formula. So know your people, try to step out of what you know, and you'll be good.
Yes, and who have you done work for? Recognizable organizations, entities, and the like.
Okay, so I started out, my first client was Indira Coffee. I think every so often I look back to how I started and I say a prayer to the guys of Indiro. Brilliant people. I also like that Banja Galiza. They truly wanted me to do this. So they're my first people. And this is actually without experience because you see, I had not worked for a reputable person for them to refer to. Right? So Indiro gave me a chance. I did the first thing, I did the second thing, and with each coffee shop that I worked on, I perfected the skill. So I did work for Indiro. I have done work for individual people who are also quite reputable, I think. I've done work for law firms. There's Adalchi, it's a law firm in Gogo House. I have done for, yeah, I won't mention names. I think it puts me in a spot to mention names. But yeah, I would work with Indiro because I did quite a lot with them, actually.
What did you do and in their coffee shops?
Initially, when we started out, they had at the time put a coffee shop. They wanted to put like a coffee bar, coffee shop in a gym at the time in Design Hub called Ultimate Cycling. That was our first encounter where it wasn't a first encounter as people, but it was the first job project I was going to do. So we did that. And then the one where I fully took over, because remember the first one I kind of joined halfway. The second one was the Indiro Coffee in Stanchart, the Speak Road. Yeah, that was fully, this is on you. You have 15 days and it's a bank. So I actually couldn't work during day. I had to work night. I also had a 9 to 5 at the time. So that was like the true test of what I can do. So I did the Stanchart coffee bar in there. We did some work in CP, Capture, that's Capture, right? Yeah, I did some work for the coffee shop in there. I did some extra Reno things for Kisementi, for Mienga. So it was a piece and a piece here. Yeah, so I did work for them in the different shops, like about 5 to 6.
You now have this experience and expertise. How have you shared what you know with others in terms of training, in terms of mentorship?
So the birth of my business, again, like I said, I attribute it to God in many ways. I had a difficult journey transitioning from, when people are leaving high school to university. For me, it was a different story. And in a way, it birthed something. And when I was starting out, it was very difficult, especially for women. I'll speak for me because, that's the experience I know. All the people that I saw in the furniture business were the women were always the ones sanding, or at least the biggest number. They were always sanding. And eventually I come to find they don't earn as much as the people making the actual pieces, And I was like, we need to change that because, here I am a number of years later. I've been able to do a few things for my family, for myself. And the reason I say this is also because ideally I would have been considered a school dropout. I'm actually only pursuing an undergrad 11 years later because I couldn't afford to at the time, right?
What are you studying?
So right now, I'm at the Nkozi University, Uganda Matters, but the Rubaga campus. Which is an interesting experience altogether, going back to do an undergrad now. But anyway, the reason I say I attribute it to God first before I come to your question is that this is someone who had left their village, or Konjiri. We'd lost everything. I had no hope, absolutely, to ever do anything good for myself, right? I've gotten here, now I've done this business. This business seems to be taking 1, 2, 3, shots. So I said, you know what? It would be terrible if I failed to pass on this. So what we did is I started to apply for grants with Kuonyesha. One of them was Kuonyesha. And I managed to actually get the fund. So House of Ndinda was one of were the partners for this is 2025, so 2024, 2025, because now they have new people, which is 2025, 2026. And we got the grant. And the reason I pitched my idea was to train as many women. Again, looking back at where I was, what I've done, I figured someone else could learn from this. But also, I would want for this field to have as many women as men, because we all can. And usually it's the women who have dropped out of school. Usually they tell you if you fail to finish your university, your life is finished. You have to get married. It is those things. It's your life is over. You can't, look after your family. You can't. It's one of those things. So what I wanted to do when I pitched was I'll train girls like me who are dropouts, who don't think they can actually afford to go to school, because I also know it's tricky getting jobs. I don't know now, I think it's a bit changed, but way back then, getting a job was hard. You had to prove you had 10 years of experience or something, or documents or something, and I find that they easily get you out of the equation. The minute you come with senior 4 certificate, you're quickly thrown out of the pile before you even have a chance, right? So I pitched that we're going to train about 10 girls, because I'm still sort of a small company. So I needed to do within my means. The bigger picture is it would be a big workshop space, lots of women. But I said, you know what, I'm not going to wait, so let's start now, which is why we started out after we won the grant. We started out with 10 women with unprivileged backgrounds, trained them. We took them through like 6 to 8 weeks of training, and we also managed to give them something to help them start. Some small money, some machines. So I think that's the idea, and I intend to do more of that. I think next year we're going to have something else. And also doing that also kind of opened my eyes. I find that there's so many women who are actually keen to learn, they just don't know where to go. Or when they've been to the ones they've been to, there's been a little bit of shunning. So yeah, I intend to keep doing that. At least if I train 10 women, who knows, I might change the life of 2 or 1 in the long run. Because again, for me, my life changed. When I started this business, I could afford things. My family could afford things. I can afford school. I mean, took me 11 years, but I think, and also because women really are like the backbone. I used to say that growing up, and I used to be like, what do you mean? But truly, we are the backbone of what a home is, yeah? So a woman who is not privileged to have education because life happened, they should have a chance at a job or at a business. They can own their own business, yeah.
What is it that you taught these women during this mentorship and training sessions?
Purchase wood, take it to the machine, joinery, then let it sit. Because of course when you join, you also let the pieces sit, then sanding up until finishing. The other attributes really were just more like, we can do this. How do you work in a male-dominated field? Because most of my carpenters, the guys I work with or my employees, are men, right? And I was teaching them that, it requires a certain art to be able to work with a man without making them insecure. I know this can be a very gray area for men and women, especially in our field, because I find that already it's been cemented that men are the ones who work in here. So, and this is a few of the challenges I got over the years, is that when you come, the first thing they think is, Olimwala, you won't be able to make it. That's one way to say it. The other is, you're too bougie, because there's a narrative about women just being slayers, like, for the other things. So I find that when you first get into a space where men are, there's a level of dismissiveness that happens. So I was teaching them that, we can actually work together with men. We just have to find the right art. I'm not saying diminish yourself. I'm not saying put yourself in an angle. I'm simply saying if you just need to learn, it's like learning a language of bargaining. You have to know when not to. And for me, the quickest was be friends. Just normal friends. Don't come with the hierarchies. Don't, I don't know. Also, dress how you want to be approached. Because I also know that, it's a free world, so we have different styles of approach and dressing those things. But working in a male-dominated field, especially one that's handy, requires that you also dress a certain way. So I taught them a few of those, because most of the girls were really young. I don't know that they've seen as much. So which was one of the things we taught them. We also taught them just the practicalities of design. When you walk into a space, what do you sight out for? When a client gives you a call and says, hi, I have a space and I would like for you to design it. What are the basics? What are your first thoughts? I also taught them how to price. Because without saying that pricing is the hardest thing to do when you're starting out as a business. Because you're like, oh, when they leave me, like I'm just starting. Because I know I struggled with that. Well, there's that part, but this was just when you do something you love, you don't care as much, and I'm saying this loosely, you don't care as much for the money because you have a certain level of fulfillment from just making the piece. And I would find out later that I am about to drown in debt and losses. So I taught them how to price themselves. What is your consultation fee? There should be a consultation fee. Why is there a consultation fee? Edgar calls me and says, come, my site is in Namgongo. You're going to need transport to move, right? You're going to give this person your insight. Because yes, most people have an idea of what they want, but do they actually know what works for their space? So we went through that entire process as well. Pricing, interior design, and the actual practical work. Because all of us have our strengths. Some of us are good in front of the camera, some of us are not. You might be good at marketing the product, but you might not do the product. So how do you create that for you? How do you pick the people you employ? Which is also, for me, luckily for me, when I was thrown into that field, I kind of did everything. Because for me to get here, I was an errand boy. I used to go to Shauri Yako to buy different sorts of things, right? I used to be a delivery person. When I worked then, some things, or for some reason, for some things, we used to put them on a border. So I actually once sat on a border with a mirror. Never, I wouldn't recommend anyone to do that because the wind is going to throw you off. It's a very risky thing, right? So in that, being an errand boy, a delivery boy, I kind of learned all those things for me. But which is how I am able to know who to employ, who to avoid, what days to tell my client. Because I also know that the biggest trick for people in the field is that usually when most clients say, ababazi balimba, like they lie. We have a terrible reputation as carpenters because we take the money, we don't give you the truth, we don't actually honor the process of the craft. Because truly, it is a craft. I am purchasing the wood. I have to shoot that wood. Then when we start joining, there's gluing to do. That sits for a day or two sometimes before you do anything else. So because we want the money or we don't want to lose the client, sometimes you're like, oh no, in 14 days I'll be done. But are you actually going to be done in 14 days? Because when it rains, you can't finish. And you cannot plan a long rain, really. So it was a question of teaching them the different things to sight out for, who to employ, who to avoid, how do you go about it. As a small company, why do you have a contracted carpenter? You're going to drown because you're paying them monthly. But the thing is, our field is seasonal. Some months you have the clients, some others you don't have the clients. So if you have a contract-based carpenter, you're going to still roll out the salary. So it's just knowing what not to do. It's almost like a dance. You just have to perfect when not to. Yeah. Those are the things we took them through. And even just the experience of the carpentry. Because I know some of the girls who reached out, it was like a vetting thing. We had to come down to a small number For some people, when we told them we shared the pin where the workshop was, they'd be like, nga, it's DP side. Well, carpentry workshops are not going to be in the mall, truly. And I was teaching them that also because the field requires that you sort of street smart, you toughen up just a little bit, right? If it requires, you know what's so funny? In 11 years, I hadn't done a delivery on a border. Yesterday I jumped on a border. And I was telling them that, you see, it's not about, because I also know that the work ethic, I think, of people, and I can't blame them, I guess it's different experiences, is that it's a little easier. But sometimes things require that you actually get out of one mode to the other. I had a late delivery to make. I needed to go to the workshop and come back to my guy for upholstery. I wasn't going to sit about all day, so I had to jump on a border and go do that while the other works. And I was teaching them because, you see, when some of these girls said, oh, unfortunately, I can't come for the training because it looks like I have to go east side and it's not on the main road. I kind of sympathize because I was like, the field is going to require you to stay on site sometimes, longer hours than you intend to. I've worked on sites before till midnight. I mean, the Stanchart gig I was telling you about, I had a 9 to 5. You can't work during bank hours. I had to work from like 5 to midnight. I had 14 days to deliver. And those are things, and these things, I don't think they teach them to you in school, because they teach you the typical joinery, but the actual experience of the job, what it requires for you to sacrifice sometimes, for you to get better at it, is things like that. Also, I think leadership, because I think this is a part of leadership. If you're going to ask your carpenter to do something, or going to change their view on something, they need to see an example of it, which is why when I have conflict with my people over certain things, I don't come as a boss. I don't come and say, you see, this is why. No. I come and say, you know what? Singaya badegwe. Orabantiwano. Because you have to have, because if you ever are correcting someone from a high vantage point, the likelihood of them getting your advice are rare because they feel reprimanded as opposed to being taught. And I don't think they teach that in school. So those are a few things that I was telling them. So when it requires for me to jump on a border, my carpenters will see me on a border and be like, hey, Entebbe wajistudio ku border. And I'd be like, yes, because it's doable. So the next time when I tell him when we're in a tight fix and I say, nsabolinye ku board on detere Entebbe, he won't feel like chiri wansiwe, because he's seen me do it. And it's okay to do it. So it's those things really that we train the ladies about. At least those should have helped paint a picture of what the business requires.
From that cohort, who do you think has been your biggest success story?
She's a pretty humble person. You could almost dismiss her when you're not sure. But she was never late. She communicated when she was running late. Even when she ran late and missed something, she stayed back to learn, right? And then even during the training, that whole week, because they would come every day to the workshop, she started to make something from her house. She said she had, I have a picture of a a bookshelf she tried to make after the training and continues actually perfect that I could also show you. But Ida is my success story. I don't think the time allowed for us to go further, but I think it was a seed enough, because she came when she couldn't do anything. She started to actually do things on her own in her house. I think she stays in Nansana. So she's already trying to. So I wouldn't be surprised if next year she has a workshop of her own because she liked the craft and she put in the hours for the craft. She's my success story. And I look forward, really. Every so often I check in, I'm like, hi, how are you doing? How far are we doing? And I think there's progress. She's really progressed really well. The other lady is also pretty successful for me because I think we gave them a stepping stone. Most of the other girls have actually gone on to further their training because ours unfortunately was short. So while they felt they hadn't understood, I've seen some of them go back to other workshops to try and get better. Yeah. So to be fair, all of them were my success stories, but Ida stands out because I was actually impressed that she was trying to replicate what was being taught at her house.
You talk about so many things, especially in the mentorship that you pass on to these ladies. What is the business model upon which you anchor, your enterprise, House of Ndinda?
So we are a make-to-order business. I'll start there. And this is something I only eventually came down to. I don't think when I started out that was the idea at start was just, make a piece here and make a piece there. Because like I said, I kind of fell into it. But now where we are solely a make-to-order business. It's the only sustainable way for us. So yeah, make to order, but also we have a specific clientele. I think for us, we're not trying to make for everyone. I find that, again, I perceive our business or our model as an art making business. I know that art can have it's almost like an acquired taste. So the pieces we make are specifically for a specific clientele. The biggest part of a clientele is people who have, cafes or Airbnbs, that kind of thing. That's kind of the clientele we make for. So we don't try to stretch out too much. And like I said, we started out as an interior design and furniture company. We've now come down to just furniture. Because again, it's what we do best. I think our strength is more on the production, but also it's easy to manage. Like I said, I don't think I want to have I would want it to be big, but I also don't want it to be big in the sense. I want it to be for the few select, because woodwork is not everyone's thing. I have actually I've tried to do things out of woodwork, and it's not the same. And I think that's just for me. Someone else is going to thrive in doing what I've failed to do, right? So I don't know that I've explained your question well, but the model is more of a make to order, mainly woodwork.
At what point did you feel wood is going to be my thing?
From the minute go. And let me tell you why. So again, I came from a background, I had never been to a workshop. I did not know any wood thing. My first job had been books. I like books, so it was a bookshop. I had sort of taught or facilitated a class here and there at Aga Khan. I was more on the literally world of things, right? And then life happened, I leave that job, and I need a job. I get this job as a salesperson. Actually, the job description was salesperson for me when I went to that workshop that I went to.
Where was that?
Muti Interiors. So I got there. And, when you stay on a job 1, 2, 3, 4 days, I think I easily can talk to people, or at least I will try to network easily. So 1, 2, 3, 4 times I had to go to the back of the shop and say, hey, but what is happening in the workshop? The thing is, the process, when you see a finished product, you're like, this is like wood, like trees wood, or like something else. Because for a second, it's like, we can make this in Uganda. Actual wood. And like the trees I pass by every day come out, like they make these. So I went in the back, and there's a gentleman I'll not forget. There was like a few people really. Some I still work with them. Some we've parted ways. We've lost contact. But there's one called Silva. He's a Mnyankole. He was from my village. So I went there and I said, hi, I'm from your village. Usually I feel like that's an icebreaker. When you start with, you're with. So anyway, I started to say, I'm keen on seeing how you guys got the tabletop. So I started to hang out around these guys, and they'd be like, no, so you see when you're joining here, so, when you want to cut a round thing, this is the machine you use. When you want to, then they started to give me. So I told them, you know what, I need to be here. I want to actually learn. So they started giving me sanding jobs. So I'd come and sand for them. But of course, they'd be like, there's technique to sanding. You don't just sand like this. You have to follow the grain. You start from this and end like this. I was like, okay. 1 month, 2 months. And now we have a finished product, right? They've made like a tabletop, right? And you see, the thing is, before they finish it, you're like, I'm not sure. And then they finish the tabletop. And it's like we moved from point A to like point D. and the finishing and the grain of the wood. Oh my God. The grain of the wood is so beautiful. And the fact that it's natural, like no one went there and painted it. No. It was just mind blowing for me. And then of course they introduced the different woods. There's teak. My first time seeing Elgon teak and Sudanese teak. I was like, nah. There's no way this has been happening in this country and people are still buying your typical artificial wood stuff. Like in my head, there's no way you can see woodwork and see the artificial pieces, the MDFs and boards, and still pick that. Because I'm like, this is art. This is natural. No one touched it. No, it's just beautiful in its own. So I fell in love with Mugavo. It's a dark wood. I think it's the commonest wood we work with at House Andinda. One, it's strong. It is strong. You're going to have the piece for forever. You're going to have this beautiful piece for 10 years. If it's well done, you're good, right? And then the other teaks came along. So I knew from the get-go, even in my DIY at the time when I used to blog, I used to do the off-cut pieces. I just picked the pieces. Like it, yeah, no. So for me, it was a no-brainer, woodwork all the way. It's the hill I'm willing to die on. And I know most people don't appreciate it, but that's why I said we've come down to, the business almost now has come down to a select few that appreciate wood. Because I understand there's people who just find it very old or, but if you appreciate, it's like a level of art. If you appreciate wood, you've bought. And it's worth the money, because, if I'm going to do a comparison, I find that in most furniture shops, the synthetic pieces cost twice the price of what wood is. And you know what though? Those synthetic pieces spoil. They're like, I could give them like a time frame. It's like a year tops and you're changing something. This piece, I want to have this piece for forever. It might have, if it's under the sun, it might fade, but every time you again do the finishing, you get back to point O. So for me, any day, woodwork. For me, it's like, it's affordable compared to what the other market offers, but it's also just beautiful. You're not having to do the most.
What is on your wish list at this point in your career?
Well, top of list, after school, I think also one of the reasons I went back to school is I wanted to be able to take us to a bigger scale. Because I feel like we've now reached almost like a stagnant phase. We're good, there's a decent flow of sales, we make product, but what else? What else can we do? I'd love to import some pieces. I know it's a very difficult road, but I also think it's doable. But on top of that, I would just want to also get into spaces where I can mentor and inspire people. That's like big on my career. I want to be able to do fellowships with international people from other places, learn from them. Nairobi is high on my list. People in Nairobi, the craftsmanship, out of this world. And these are things you can only do when you've fellowshipped with people like this. So I would want for us to get out of Kampala, get out of Uganda. What else can we bring? Also, because when I started out, House of Ndinda was it. But I feel like now there's like another 10 House of Ndindas doing what we can do, right? Which means, what else can I give to these people? So I went to school, so I want to elevate this mentorship thing because I'm really big on that. But I also think through that mentorship and learning, I'm able to tap into the different crafts, different people. And then ultimately, I'd want for House of Ndinda to just be like a house of things like I intended to. We could pick on pottery. We could pick on, have like a line. I used to say I would have a line of like dining plates made by House of Ndinda. You know how like there's like Luminac for glasses and there's like, I don't know, the fancy brands for plates and cups. I'd want for that to be. So it's a house of things. And then eventually get into real estate. Yeah, I want to be able to furnish some spaces for people to stay in, Airbnb. Because I think it's also a way of showcasing what we do, but it's also like an outlet for us to continue to produce, to try out the pieces that we make, and people are like, oh, you'll be shocked at how many people might like it when it's out of this space you're creating for. So yeah, That's the idea. Then I think eventually I want to be a teacher of literature and language. I still like my books.
What do you do to let off the steam?
I run a pretty disciplined life, so I don't know that I do much. On a good day, I'll play music on my vinyl. I'm at home. I'm a homebody, so I don't step out as often. So when I'm in the house, I'll play some music. I'll watch a movie. Lately, I have a 1 month plan with my girlfriends.
Who is on your playlist?
Oh, so many. But I'll start with JP Cooper. JP Cooper has great music. For my albums, Nina Simone, of course. But I like Gladys Knight. And I've almost started to pick up on some jazz, so Coltrane. I have had friends who like jazz and they've influenced me in a way or two, so Coltrane is good. And lately, Olivia Dean. I feel like Olivia Dean just gave us a perfect album. But yeah, I am almost pretty old souled for music. So yeah. But those are like top. If I kind of give you genre, each genre. Yeah.
The old soul
Yeah.
in a young body.
Ish, yeah. Which I love in a way. I wouldn't have it any other way, I think.
So, and then tell us a little bit about the vintage in you.
By now, maybe you can tell that the biggest influences is my parents. My mother is actually mainly the reason I am so old. I'm old soul, sorry. So my mother grew up in those days. She's born to a single parent. Their dad during the war just never came back home. So they were raised by a mother. I have a strong matriarch on that end. So for ways their mother taught them or gave them education, there used to be like a whole program around people who would go to study at churches, so missionaries. So my mom did a little bit of catering and a few other lessons, baking, skills like that at this church. My mother has refined taste for a person that comes from a small village. I think she does influences from all those things. So her dressing, she would pick florals, like a vintage floral. The linens, there's a running joke that my entire family wears linens, which in a way is true, but it's all because of my mom. And then her cutleries and her dining. So I think that's where it mainly came from. But also an exposure. I have a little bit of, because my parents, again, I'd say my parents are adventurous. So they've also been in all sorts of walks of lives. But yeah, I think the vintage is from my mom. But also I think when you like unique things, you're bound to end up on that end. Because I don't do fast fashion. I don't do, there's this new thing and there's this new thing. I am more like, does it have a story? Because I feel like almost all vintage pieces have a story. So I actually thrift a lot. For these things. Yeah, so my mom is the reason I think, old souled. She has a refined taste, which I think is also from influences of the people she had school with.